Tantor Audio presents A Delusion of Satan, the full story of the Salem witch trials, by Francis Hill. Narrated by Wanda McCaddon. Introduction by Karen Armstrong. People on both sides of the Atlantic have long been fascinated by the Salem witch hunts. They have instinctively attributed to them an importance that is surprising, considering that they lasted only a short time and were, fortunately, quickly contained. Thousands of witches died during the great witch hunts that devastated Europe during the 16th and 17th centuries, afflicting Catholic and Protestant countries alike. In some Swiss villages there were scarcely any women left alive after the frenzy had finally burned itself out. Yet this catastrophe is almost too large to grasp. Precisely because the Salem disaster was on a much smaller scale, victims and perpetrators alike can become intimately known to us. By studying what happened in Salem in detail, we can learn some valuable but painful lessons about the darkness and perversity of the human heart, and about some of the particular dilemmas that continue to afflict the Western spirit. Arthur Miller memorably illustrated the emblematic nature of the Salem tragedy in The Crucible, pointing to the parallel with the McCarthy trials of the 1950s. For nearly 1,000 years, the peoples of Western Europe and America have been periodically convulsed by a murderous fear of enemies whom they have fashioned in their own image and likeness. Jews, Muslims, heretics, communists, and women have all at times been presented as the enemies of society. Often they were described in ways that revealed a profound disturbance in the Western psyche. In Europe, the fantasies that showed Jews as child slayers displayed an almost Oedipal fear of the parent faith. The conviction that women had sex with demons and flew through the air to worship Satan in orgiastic parodies of the Mass showed a truly diabolic terror of sexuality in the female. Crusaders and inquisitors sought out these imaginary foes and killed them. Some of the people who had been terrorized in this way left Europe, fleeing religious persecution to find a new and better world in America. But, as Salem shows, they brought their phobias and frustrations with them. They also brought from Europe an inadequate conception of religion. Instead of seeing compassion as the primary religious virtue, the Puritans of New England, latter-day Crusaders, cultivated a harsh, unyielding righteousness that was quick to judge and condemn. Instead of seeing God as all-powerful and all-forgiving, the Puritans saw Satan everywhere. Western Christianity is unique among the monotheisms in the power it has attributed to the devil. In Judaism, Satan is firmly subservient to God, and evil is never allowed to attain such near omnipotent status. In Islam, Satan is either a trivial creature, not to be taken seriously, or he will be forgiven on the last day. He can never be an ultimate threat, and is no match for Allah. But Western Christians have not always attained that degree of confidence in their God. From the start, religion was often experienced as a struggle and a strain. All these traits can be seen in the story of Salem. Yet until now there has been no easily accessible account of the witch hunt there. When I visited Salem in 1992, I looked in vain in the bookstore for a serious study. I found many books about the occult, New Age theology, and modern pagan movements, but nothing to explain in depth what had happened in that New England village in 1692. It is incorrect to class the witches of Salem with the so-called white witches beloved by modern feminists. There is nothing healing or spiritual about the Salem story. It teaches something far more uncomfortable about the ills that afflict our own society and that plague our own hearts. That is why Francis Hill has performed such a valuable service. Her carefully researched and compelling account helps us to enter into Salem life in such a way that the protagonists become real individuals, with mundane concerns and frustrations familiar to each one of us. As we listen, we learn how boredom, envy, a sense of injustice or of being marginalized, trivial ills that we have all experienced, can fester and explode into a destructive violence that assumes truly diabolic proportions. Salem happened in the New World. The Protestant Reformation, of which the Puritans were the proud vanguard in the 17th century, claimed to have thrown aside the medieval shibboleths of Catholic Europe. The American Revolution would be fuelled by the ideals of the Enlightenment, its constitution inspired by the Age of Reason. Yet, like Europe, the United States would continue to be plagued by the primitive terrors that lie beyond the control of rationality. It is a reminder that however modern and scientific our society, we can still be haunted by inner demons which we project outward onto others with abhorrent effect. During the 20th century in both Europe and America, we have seen and continue to see some of the most savage witch hunts of all time. People sometimes say that the decline of religion is to blame for such catastrophes. What Francis Hill's book shows so clearly is that bad religion can be as destructive as the most virulent atheism. Like any other human activity, religion can be abused and made to exacerbate our frightened egoism instead of helping us to transcend it. We must learn from past mistakes if we are to avoid such disasters in the future, and where better to begin than Salem? Francis Hill's scholarly reconstruction does not allow us to glamorize these sad events, but helps us to understand exactly what happened, balancing critical insight with a sympathy that was sorely lacking in the Puritan community of Salem. When we hear this story of a community alienated from its roots, struggling for survival in an uncharted realm, riddled with tension, jealousy, and resentment, we will find ourselves in familiar terrain and learn some valuable lessons about the modern predicament. Man seeks for drama and excitement. When he cannot get satisfaction on a higher level, he creates for himself the drama of destruction. Erich Fromm, The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness. It doesn't matter what you believe, so long as you don't believe it completely. Bertrand Russell. Fear is the enemy of love. St. Augustine. Preface to the 2002 edition. There have always been witch hunts. When I originally wrote A Delusion of Satan in 1995, a modern persecution terrifyingly similar to the hysteria of 1692 was still at its height, opened by a PBS television program called Innocence Lost, which recounted the almost unbelievable events at the Little Rascals Daycare Center in Edenton, North Carolina. A mother had made accusations of sex abuse of her child against the center's director. Other parents and a number of police investigators, prosecutors and therapists believed her and elicited further accusations from other children at the center. Skeptical parents were pressured to believe the 3-year-old's stories. Eventually, 90 children were sent into therapy, with therapists paid for by the prosecution, and as a result named 30 people who had supposedly molested them in horrifying ways. In due course, 2 of the accused, the centre's director and a young female assistant, were tried, convicted, and given life sentences. But the programme's dramatised trial transcripts and interviews with almost everyone involved made abundantly clear that the original accusations were false, and the testimonies in court of the very young victims were entirely the product of adult suggestion and childish fancy. I soon learned that the Little Rascals case was one of many. America was in the grip of a satanic ritual abuse scare, born of the concerns, fears and anxieties of an unlikely collection of groups, including right-wing Christians, feminists and child abuse workers. At least 57 people were in jail as a result of wrongful convictions for sex abuse. Another closely allied persecution was causing at least as much misery. The belief that traumatic memories of sexual abuse can be repressed for years or even decades and then recovered in therapy was destroying thousands of American families. Originating with Freud, the theory contradicts all modern scientific knowledge about the workings of memory. But in the 1980s and 1990s, thousands of therapists made their livings by recovering memories through hypnosis or suggestion. Vast numbers of adult children were induced falsely to accuse their middle-aged or elderly parents of abusing them in their infancy. Some took legal action, resulting in convictions and imprisonment, on no evidence but memories that were not memories at all. The satanic abuse witch hunt has ended, although at least 4 innocent people convicted as a result of it still languish in jail. The recovered memory persecution is also, at last, tailing off, with only 1 new accusation in 2001, according to the American False Memory Syndrome Foundation. In Britain, the number of current new accusations is higher since the witch hunt started there later. These linked persecutions have been dubbed the Third Wave. Salem was the first, McCarthyism the second. In the 1950s, a U.S. Senator, Joseph McCarthy, armed with the powers of the House Un-American Activities Committee, sought out members and supporters of the Communist Party, mostly men and women living productive, respectable lives, and stripped them of their employment. Some, who refused to cooperate, went to prison. Is there a 4th wave soon to come? Since September 11, 2001, the fear of terrorism has produced an upsurge of unprovoked attacks on law-abiding Muslims. It has also produced the USA Patriot Act, under which an alien suspected of terrorism can be jailed for 7 days without charge and for 6 months if charged with any crime at all, even wholly unrelated. Hundreds of aliens have been detained, charged either with nothing or with minor immigration offences that would not by themselves justify detention. It is as important as ever to understand what makes witch hunts develop. The Salem persecution occurred over so short a period of time and is so well documented that it reveals the development of a witch hunt rather clearly. In a climate of fear and intolerance, accusations by unstable individuals led to interested parties seizing the chance to further their agendas and target their enemies. Together with the population's rage against scapegoats and doubters' fears of speaking out, this led to more accusations and, eventually, the perversion of the justice system to convince innocent people on unreliable evidence. When I first visited Salem in 1992, I found that despite the millions of words written on the subject, there was no satisfactory up-to-date account of that horrifying but illuminating story. Arthur Miller's The Crucible, the source of most people's knowledge of the witch hunt, is an extraordinarily powerful piece of theatre, but not historically accurate. Marion Starkey's The Devil in Massachusetts, published in 1949, is now out of date, superseded by recent research into Salem Village politics. In any case, it often lapses into fiction. A Delusion of Satan was the result of this discovery of the lack of an accurate narrative. At first I wondered if I, as an English woman, was fit for the task of describing a key episode in American history. But Massachusetts in 1692 was not yet America, and its inhabitants not yet Americans. The first emigrants had left England in the 1630s with no desire to separate emotionally or culturally from their homeland or its church. They had been trying to purify the Church of England for decades, attempting to rid it of ritual and the Book of Common Prayer, and replace poorly educated ministers with highly trained preachers. Most Anglicans believed that to know the Lord's Prayer and try to be a good fellow was enough for any Christian. The Puritans hoped by fiery intellectual sermons to transform them into soul-searching zealots. They had considerable success, particularly in England's eastern counties, until King James, resenting their challenges to his power, issued an edict that forbade preachers to sermonize on Puritan themes. His successor, King Charles, took a more drastic approach. In 1629, when the English Parliament passed resolutions favouring the Puritan cause, he decided to govern as an all-powerful monarch without the Lords or Commons. The Great Migration to Massachusetts, led by John Winthrop, was the result. The emigrants took their English Puritan beliefs and practices with them. These held firm, though in the mother country Puritanism had soon all but destroyed itself. However, the ties between England and its province stayed close. As an Englishwoman, when I read the Salem witch hunt's primary sources, I recognized the tones of class deference and authority and the ethos of self-control and repression. The England of my childhood just after the Second World War was in fundamental ways the same England that the Puritans took with them to New England. It was a homogeneous Anglo-Saxon community with few immigrants from other backgrounds and cultures. Pleasure and self-indulgence were suspect. The individual was schooled to perpetual self-doubt.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?